Have you ever felt like life just keeps throwing one problem after another at you? A tiny setback feels like a mountain, and a small criticism stings for days. If so, you're not alone. I want to share a story with you today, a story about a young boy named Arav who felt exactly the same way. It's a simple story, but the lesson it holds is incredibly powerful, and might just change the way you see your own challenges. Arav was a good kid, but he had a habit of complaining. A lost pen would ruin his morning. A difficult math problem would make him feel like a failure. A disagreement with a friend would feel like the end of the world. Every single day, he'd come home with a long list of grievances, his shoulders slumped, and his face etched with frustration. His world was full of annoyances, big and small, and he felt like he was drowning in them. His father, a wise and patient man, listened quietly day after day. He saw how these small, everyday struggles were stealing his son's joy and making him bitter. He knew that simply telling Arav to be positive or stop complaining wouldn't work. He needed to show him, not just tell him. So one sunny afternoon, his father took him to a beautiful, tranquil spot by a small, crystal-clear pond. The air was fresh, and the only sound was the gentle rustling of leaves. The father handed Arav a small handful of salt. "Son," he said, "throw this salt into the pond." Arav did as he was told, watching the white grains dissolve and disappear into the water. "Now," his father continued, "take a sip of the water." Arav cupped his hands, drank a little, and his father asked, "How does it taste?" Arav shrugged. "It tastes fine, just like water." The next day, his father took him on another walk, but this time he gave him a much larger bag of salt. They walked further until they reached the banks of a great, flowing river. The water was moving powerfully, carving its path through the landscape. "Now," his father instructed, "pour all of this salt into the river." Arav emptied the entire bag into the current, watching as the salt was instantly swept away by the immense volume of water. "Go on," his father urged. "Take a drink from the river." Arav hesitated for a moment, expecting a salty taste, but he leaned down and drank. He looked up at his father, surprised. "It's fresh," he said. "I can't taste the salt at all." His father smiled warmly and put an arm around his shoulder. "Son," he began, "the salt represents the problems and pains in life. The amount of salt was the same in both scenarios, but the effect was completely different. The pond is small, so a little bit of salt makes the whole thing taste bitter. The river, however, is vast and powerful. It can absorb the same amount of salt, and much more, without its nature being changed." He paused, letting the words sink in. The pain in life doesn't change. We all face hardships, disappointments, and frustrations. But the experience of that pain depends entirely on the container you put it in. When your heart is small like the pond, the smallest problem can poison your whole existence. But if you can learn to expand your heart to become vast and flowing like the river, you can handle the same problems without being overwhelmed. The salt is still there, but you barely notice it. Arav stood there, staring at the mighty river, and for the first time he understood. It wasn't about the problems themselves, it was about him. He had been living his life like a small pond, letting every little grain of salt ruin his water. He realized his father wasn't telling him that his problems weren't real, or that he shouldn't feel upset. He was showing him that he had a choice. He couldn't always stop the salt from being thrown into his life, but he could choose the size of his container. He could choose to be a pond or a river. That day marked a turning point for Arav. He decided he wanted to be the river. It wasn't an overnight transformation, of course. The habit of complaining was deeply ingrained. The next time he faced a challenge, his first instinct was still to feel overwhelmed and frustrated. But then he would remember the river. He'd take a deep breath and ask himself, "Am I being a pond or a river right now?" Instead of seeing a difficult task as an insurmountable obstacle, he started to see it as a chance to stretch his abilities, to expand his capacity. When a friend said something that hurt him, instead of letting it fester and poison his mind, he learned to address it, let it go, and allow the current of his life to move on. He realized that holding on to bitterness was like letting the salt settle at the bottom of the pond, making the water permanently undrinkable. He started focusing on what he could control: his response. He couldn't control the difficulty of his homework, but he could control his approach to it, breaking it down, asking for help, and celebrating the progress he made. He couldn't control other people's moods, but he could control his own, choosing not to let someone else's bad day ruin his. Slowly but surely, Arav began to change. He became calmer, more resilient. The small annoyances that used to derail his entire day now felt like tiny pebbles in a massive stream. He noticed them, but they didn't alter his course. He smiled more. He laughed more freely. His friends noticed the change, finding him more enjoyable to be around. His relationship with his parents improved because he was no longer a constant source of negativity. He was happier, not because his problems had vanished, but because he had grown bigger than them. The core lesson Arav learned is one we can all apply to our lives. It's not about removing the salt, but about becoming the river. We often waste so much energy trying to create a life free of problems, a life with no salt. We wish for no challenges, no difficult people, no unexpected setbacks. But that's an impossible goal. A life without salt is a life without growth, without flavor, without lessons. The real path to peace and resilience isn't to eliminate challenges, but to expand our capacity to handle them. It's about enlarging our hearts, our minds, our perspectives. When we're mentally and emotionally expansive, we can absorb life's difficulties without losing our essential nature, our joy, our peace, our kindness. So, how can we become more like the river? It starts with self-awareness. The next time you feel overwhelmed by a problem, pause and ask yourself, how big is my container right now? Are you letting a small issue contaminate your entire day? Second, practice perspective. Think about the grand scale of your life, or even the universe. Will this problem matter in a week, a year, 5 years? Often, zooming out helps us see the true size of the salt. Third, cultivate growth. Every challenge is an opportunity to expand. See difficulties not as punishments, but as exercises for your soul. Each one you overcome strengthens your emotional and mental muscles, making you more capable of handling the next one. Finally, practice letting go. The river is constantly flowing. It doesn't hold on to the things that fall into it. Learn to process your emotions, sadness, anger, frustration, and then let them flow through you and away from you. Holding on to them is what makes the water bitter. The story of Arav and the river is a beautiful reminder that our inner world shapes our outer experience. We can't control the winds and the tides of life, but we can learn to build a bigger boat. We can't stop the salt from falling, but we can choose to be a vast, flowing river instead of a small, stagnant pond. The next time life throws a handful of salt at you, remember this story. Take a deep breath, and instead of wishing the salt away, focus on expanding your heart. Become the river. Let your capacity for peace, resilience, and joy be so vast that no amount of salt can ever change the freshness of your water. Thanks for watching today. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content to help you navigate the beautiful, challenging river of life. See you in the next video.